district House race, and and kind of getting to when Monica Vernon announced, it was middle of January. Just I think Congress had been in session just a few days. What is that? I mean, how much of a break is that from the norm now? Because I know Pat Murphy announced in the middle of February, and what does that mean for this kind of mission creep that we're seeing with the campaign, just constantly getting earlier and earlier?
Right. And the difference is we're used to that with presidential campaigns just because they are so massive and because we have the caucuses early anyway. But with congressional campaigns, it's a little bit newer. It depends a lot on the district. But there are two things going on. Within the first district particularly, it's considered a toss-up district, or had been prior to the last election cycle. And this coming election cycle, it's seen as one of the top opportunities for Democrats to pick up a seat that they're currently held by a Republican, and so there's that possibility of then getting it turned over for Democrats because there is a slight voter registration advantage for Democrats in that particular district. Of course, it's still going to be the no-party voters that will determine it, but still it's that good opportunity, Democrats think, to pick up that seat, particularly in a presidential year where you have more people that maybe, or at least this is the belief, that will vote for Democrats. Now, of course, a lot of that's going to depend who the candidate is for both parties, Republicans and Democrats, but there is that opportunity, seemingly, for Democrats to then take back this seat, which, of course, had been held by Bruce Braley previously. The second factor going on here is that sometimes when you announce early, you can keep other people out of the race. And we saw that in a couple of races the last time around, particularly in the 3rd district, when you had an early announcement, and then, of course, things changed on the Republican side. But for the Democrats, then it kept pretty much everybody else out of the race at that particular time. And to some extent, we're seeing that in the presidential race with Hillary Clinton, that sort of a lot of people are waiting to see what she does. If she gets in, other people won't. If she doesn't get in, other people will join the race. And so I think maybe that at least was the goal of Monica Vernon, having first run for the nomination as for the Democrats candidate in the 1st district, not gotten that, but then on the ticket for the gubernatorial election, that she has pretty good name recognition, able to connect with people in the 1st district, and maybe if she announced early, it would keep other people out, so it would not put her in a tough primary fight. Well, apparently that's not going to be the case.
And then I guess from the Ravi Patel side now, he was saying, we're actually talking to him later today, but he was saying that he absolutely had to bump up his timeline because all of a sudden now he's losing out on that. I mean, so I guess in bumping up his timeline, he's trying to avoid that getting boxed out. Is that the idea?
That's pretty much, and what you see happening is, and we see this again with Monica Vernon, where she picks up a number of endorsements from various people, and that includes public officials, but also donors. That you get donors that are interested in the race, and they think, well, this is a strong candidate and has a good argument to make for being the nominee and then potentially strong in the election. And then all of a sudden, if one candidate announces early and gets all those people, then anybody else that are thinking about it, then they're basically left out in the cold or have a much harder time. And so that forces up the timeline. And I mentioned Hillary Clinton before, but we also saw that on the presidential side for Jeb Bush, in the sense that when he made his move early on, it forced some other people on the Republican side to move up their timeline as well. And so we're kind of seeing that at the congressional level here for the Democrats, at least, in terms of one person announces and that forces somebody else who may have been thinking about it to get into the race, and some other people that may say, well, okay, I'm not going to get in. But then we just still have to wait and see how the race develops. That it may be that one or more of those folks at some point decide to change their mind. Things maybe aren't working out well, or for other reasons, personal reasons, and so then the race opens up again. So there's certainly a dynamic to it, but at least right now it seems that it's a matter of one person announcing early to try to freeze out other people, and another having to move up his timeline as a result of that.
What does this do for voter apathy? Because we just got done, and everyone was talking about how tired they were hearing about, all this stuff, and now, we're right back at it again.
It's kind of a combination of things. Again, to a certain extent, we're used to it in Iowa, although not so much at the congressional level. And I think that a lot of people maybe aren't paying close attention. It's not the situation like it is in the month or 6 weeks before an election, where we're inundated with phone calls and mailers and radio ads and all this sort of thing. So it'll be more of a low key that people will get out. They'll meet with activist groups, county central committees, various other community groups of one sort or another. They'll meet privately with donors and public officials. So it'll be kind of a low-key thing. It won't be sort of that sort of rush to all of the stuff that we're foisted upon us in various ways. And also for a congressional race, it's a little bit tough because of what's going on in the presidential race and the lead up to the caucuses. So the caucuses will kind of take all of the energy out of a lot of that. But these folks then need to show up, and it'll give them an opportunity to show up with candidates, more so obviously for Republicans. Democrats, we still have a few people coming in, whether it's Governor O'Malley or Senator Sanders or maybe Senator Warren if she decides to come in, or some other folks. So they'll have some opportunities to sort of meet with high-profile folks that will come in, and hopefully eventually Hillary Clinton, if she gets into the race and starts to come back to Iowa on a more regular basis. And so these people that are already announced candidates have an opportunity then to meet with them and raise their name recognition to a certain extent.
Another kind of story and angle we're working on today is how Rod Blum won successfully by kind of trumping his business background. Pat Murphy was a little bit of an easy target there because he hadn't done much not in the State House. But now both the Democratic candidates so far, Monica Vernon has the Vernon Research Group, and then Ravi Patel is the president of a pretty big hotel chain. They have these business backgrounds that they seem to be trumping too, which is a very Republican thing to do almost. What's it like for the two candidates so far to be pushing this business and to be pushing this, outsider narrative?
It's interesting. You're right that usually it's the Republicans that talk about their business experience and so forth, but Democrats can do that too when they've had some successful business of one sort or another. Now, of course, it's going to depend a little bit on what the business is, and particularly good would be a business that provides a lot of jobs in some way, or brings business to the state of Iowa and provides jobs for Iowans in one way or another. And that would give them, either of those candidates that have announced for the Democratic nomination, give them an opportunity to sort of blunt some of the advantage that Blum has in that particular area. Say, well, we've created jobs too, and I know that some people during the last campaign were criticizing Blum for certain business decisions he had, so maybe they can talk about it in those terms. But then, of course, that opens them up for criticisms along the same line, and so you can kind of get into that fight. But the basic idea is to try to neutralize at least one aspect of Blum's resume that may have been seen as an advantage. And again, that gives them an opportunity, them being the folks on the Democratic side, an opportunity to say, well, look, we have in fact created jobs, that we understand the business environment, that it's not all what Republicans say, that it's this, that, and another. So again, it gives them a better sort of hook on which they can talk about some of these things, as opposed to somebody like a Pat Murphy, who basically spent his career in the state legislature, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in terms of that experience, people like to say, well, have you created jobs? Do you understand the burden of regulation and so forth? And for folks like Vernon and Patel, they can say, yes, we understand that burden, and we think that it's not that bad. We can still be successful and do more. That's going to be essentially the argument that they would try to make.
On a macro level, though, is it a sign of a shift in what your typical Republican and typical Democrat look like now?
Well, yes and no. The typical professor response always, yes and no. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a shift, but it's a recognition of where you're at in particular, and by that I mean the district that you're in, what sort of things are important. And again, here in Iowa, that you usually have you have to pay close attention to what the no party voters are thinking about. And for a lot of those folks, that they may be in business themselves or work for small businesses, and they understand the burden and so forth. And for them, some of this theoretical politics, they don't care about this stuff, saying, look, I want a job, I want a good job, I want to be able to provide for my family and do good things for them and protect them in various ways. How can you help me in that regard? And so then when you get into some of these other arguments, they don't really care as much. And so to a certain extent, it's a recognition, again, here, particularly in Iowa, that you have to make sure you're appealing to those folks that don't have quite as much attention for the more political side of things, that are looking more at the practical side of things.
Is this a shift that you think we'll start to see more and more of? Where a lot of people in Washington now are lawyers, or and have a very limited professional experience, except for your few kind of outliers. Do you think more people will jump over from the private sector because they have something to say or think they want to make a difference.
We've seen that all along, where there have been people that come in from the private sector and tout their business experience. We've seen that a little bit more on the Republican side, particularly because Republicans generally have taken that position of not wanting a bigger government, although there have often been big government Republicans, so that you do kind of have a dissension among the party on those terms. Democrats have usually been more in favor of bigger government, so we haven't had quite as many people from the private sector come in, but you do have a few that have made their fortune or done their business experience or however it is, whether it's, I named the pops of mine is Tom Steyer, who was spending a lot of money on the economic or the environmental sorts of things in the last race, and he was considering a run for the California Senate race, decided not to. He's going to work in other ways. But so he's kind of coming in from the private sector in a sense. John Corzine from New Jersey is another one who's done that, and there have been some others as well. So you do see that, and to the extent that maybe there's more of a feeling in the country that, well, maybe Washington doesn't understand what's going on for middle America, that you may in fact have a few more Democrats coming in from that way to join some of the Republicans as well.
Sure. Anything you think we missed, or anything else to tack on? Or?
Not really.